Yo, what's going on, guys? So now in this section, we're going to go over setting expectations. And so setting expectations is going to happen during the discovery/qualification call, and it's going to happen right after you start building rapport with your prospect. What exactly is setting expectations? Well, I'm going to show you an example of what it means to not set expectations so you see that stark contrast. Okay, so imagine you're sitting in your office and suddenly your phone rings and somebody, you pick it up and somebody's on the phone. And this person says, "Hey, Patrick, how's it going? My name's John from blah, 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 blah." So you say, "Okay, are you trying to sell me anything?" And then the person responds, "No, Patrick, I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm just trying to tell you about an opportunity, blah, 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 blah." So in this situation, you're probably thinking, and, it's a salesperson on the phone, right? And, what does this person want? When is this going to be over? And is it rude if I hang up? So, in selling situations, a lot of times, you might get a cold call and the person just tries to sell you something. And really, they're setting the right expectations. So you have all these questions running in your mind, and you basically just want to get off the phone with this person. So it's the same thing in any type of selling situation. You want to set the right expectations in the beginning so people know what to expect and they don't have these questions running in their mind. Here's an example of what that looks like. So you want to first make it clear what's going to happen during the meeting. And you want to make an agreement on what will happen after the meeting as well. And then you want to make sure that the main points of interest on both sides are going to be covered. So it's better to be better at setting expectations than being the best presenter. So setting expectations is extremely important because it's going to set the framework for the entire sales process. And, the setting expectations is also going to give the prospect the feeling that they are in control, but in reality, you as a salesperson will always be in control. And what's great about expectations is that you're either going to get a yes or no decision, and you're never going to get a maybe if you set the correct expectations. And this is important because a lot of times in selling situations, a salesperson may not know whether or not the person's actually interested, and they say, "Oh, I'll think it over." So by setting the right expectations, I'm going to show you how to make sure you either get a yes or a no, so nobody is wasting each other's time. So here are going to be the 5 elements of setting expectations. The first part is the time and purpose of the meeting. Number 2 is the prospect's expectation and what their agenda is. After that, you're going to go into your expectations and your own agenda. And after that, you're going to give them the results of what will happen after the meeting. And finally, you're going to go over any main obstacles during this phase. So let's go ahead and dive into each one so that you understand each of the variables, and then we're going to put it all together in the end. So time and purpose of the meeting. What you want to do is you want to set the appropriate amount of time to cover all the agenda items for that meeting. So you explain the reason for the meeting and what conditions are needed to continue the business relationship. Here's an example. So, after you do your bonding rapport, then you're going to say, "Now, John, I reached out to you because it seemed like there might be an opportunity for us to work with each other. And like we talked about over email, a 25-minute conversation would be enough time to see if that was the case. Does that still work for you?" So in this example, you're giving the person how long it's going to take, 25 minutes, and you're giving them why there is a meeting in the first place. And you could pretty much use the same time and purpose for every single meeting, right? Because it's not going to change for the most part. You set a time of how long the meeting is going to be, and then you say why exactly you're having that meeting in the first place. After that, you're going to go into the prospect's expectations for this meeting. So you're going to discover what the prospect expectations are and their agenda is. And you want to make it clear how you will address all of their expectations, and you're making sure that you're actually listening to them. So here's an example. So you're going to say, "Obviously, you're going to have some questions for me and how our solution might be able to help you grow your business, and I'll do my best to answer those questions." So super simple. You're just saying that in that meeting, this person is going to have a lot of questions for you, and you're going to answer them, right? Very straightforward. And then after that, you're going to go into what your expectations are, and you're going to clearly explain what your goals are for the meeting and explain what information you will need from the prospect to accomplish these goals. So here's the example. "And naturally, I'll have some questions for you so I can get a better understanding of your business and how we might best help you. Does that sound fair to you? And then the other person's going to say, yeah, that sounds fair. So what you're doing is you're saying, you're going to have a lot of questions for them to understand their business, see how you can help them. And that's really all. That's the purpose of the meeting. You're not trying to sell them anything yet. You are just trying to gather as much information as possible so you can make a decision on whether or not it makes sense to move forward after the qualification or the discovery call. And so after that, you're going to go into the results of the meeting so that at the end of the meeting, either you're going to continue that business relationship and continue with the deal, or you're going to end the sales cycle right there if you determine that it may not be the best fit to work with each other. So here is an example. At the end of the meeting, either one of two things will happen. If we see a fit to work with each other, great. Then we can move forward to the next steps towards the last 5 minutes of the call. But if not, that's totally okay. And I want you to be comfortable with telling me no at any time. And of course, I'll do the same for you. Does that sound good to you? And they're going to say, yeah, that sounds good. So what you're saying is you're giving them two different options. Either it's a yes or a no, right? And this is exactly what I meant by yes, no, but never maybe. Either there is a fit and you move on to the next step, or you determine there's no fit and then the deal ends right there. And that's totally okay because, at the end of the day, you're just trying to see if it makes sense to work with each other. You're not trying to sell them. You're not trying to convince them on anything. You're just gathering information. And finally, what you want to do is you want to tackle all the main big obstacles in the beginning of the presentation. So, you bring out your biggest fears or potential obstacles and you address them head on. So an example would be, my biggest fear is we may not have enough time to cover everything. So if we do run out of time, is it okay if we schedule another meeting after this one if it makes sense to discuss further? So, maybe in your sales cycle, you realize that typically on the first call, it's just not enough time to cover everything. And so maybe you got burned in the past where you needed more time and the person didn't want to give it to you. So by saying this in the beginning and, they agreeing to it, if you run out of time in the meeting, you can ask for more time, like you said. Another thing you could say is, my biggest fear is that a lot of times people don't have the budget to buy XYZ. And I just want to make sure that you're somebody that does have a budget or blah, 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 blah. And then either they say they have a budget or they don't have a budget. So that's something you could just tackle on head on depending on what obstacles you have for your product or service. I'm going to go through the setting expectations part straight through so you have an understanding of how exactly to do it. And pretty much in any sales situation, you could use the same expectations over and over as long as the sale is the same. So let's go ahead and get started. And this is going to be right after you do the bonding report and then you transition into setting expectations. Now, John, I reached out to you because it seemed like there might be an opportunity for us to work together. And like we talked about over email, a 25-minute conversation would be enough time to see if there was the case. Does that still work for you? They're going to say yes. Obviously, you're going to have some questions for me and how our solutions might be able to help you grow your business. And I'll do my best to answer those questions. And naturally, I'll have some questions for you so I can get a better understanding of your business and how we might best help you. Does that sound fair to you? They will say, yeah, that sounds fair. Then you say, at the end of the meeting, either one of two things will happen. If we see a fit to work with each other, great. Then we can move forward to the next steps towards the last 5 minutes of the call. But if not, that's totally okay. And I want you to be comfortable telling me no at any time. And of course, I'll do the same for you. Does that sound good to you? And they will say yes. And one last thing is my biggest fear is we may not have enough time to cover everything. So if we do run out of time, is it okay if we schedule another meeting after this one if it makes sense to discuss further? And they're going to say, sure. So, running it straight through, that's how you're going to set the expectations for pretty much every single meeting that you have. You're giving them the time and purpose of it. You're, covering all their agenda items and you're covering your agenda items. And you're also giving them the end result of what's going to happen at the end of the meeting, and you're covering the main obstacles. So if you cover all of these things and tell them exactly what's going to happen up front, there aren't going to be any surprises during the meeting. And at the end of the meeting, you can ask for another meeting if it makes sense to continue the sales process and go into the presentation phase because you already earned the right to do it. So setting the expectation is the most important part of a qualification and discovery call, because if you don't do it correctly, people are going to wonder in their heads, when is this meeting going to end? What does this person want? But if you answer all these questions that people will naturally think right in the beginning, then they know exactly what's going to happen and they're agreeing to it.